Good evening, everybody. My name is Frank Tremoni. I'll be the moderator for tonight's debate. I want to thank you all for coming to tonight's debate between the incumbent Senator Jim Davis and his challenger, Democrat Jane Hibbs. I look forward to a great night tonight. We hope you enjoy it. I'd like to begin by first a little house cleaning. If you don't mind, make sure you turn off your cell phones so we don't have any distractions during the debate. Also, I would ask that you please refrain from applauding until after, and please hold down any comments, criticisms, or complaints during the debate to show some respect for the candidates and so that we can move along with the questions and try to get in as many as we possibly can. The questions come from the staff here at Western Carolina University, from students, and from folks who sent in some emails. We're going to present those questions. There are some rules. They're on your chairs. They'll get 2 minutes to answer the question, then there will be a 1 minute for rebuttal for each of the candidates, and then, of course, if there is need, there could be a call for a rebuttal from either one of the candidates for either one of them, depending on the questioning and the responses. We would also like to let you know that there is a survey in your seats. It's for the university and the political science students here, so we would appreciate it if you fill that out and leave it before you go home tonight. I'd like to introduce the candidates now, and they'll be taking the podium here in a moment for our debate. We'll get started with the first question. To my right, Jane Hibbs, Democratic challenger here for the 50th seat. I can tell no Jane. She is a lifelong educator, was a teacher. She's from Haywood County, and 38 years in the education profession, and then at age 61 decided to get her nursing degree, and is a licensed nursing practitioner as well. So welcome and thank you for being here tonight. Jim Davis, the incumbent state senator. He's a two-term senator. He is from Franklin, North Carolina. He's an orthodontist. He was a dentist for 10, 13, 15 years, I think, and then decided to go back to school. He had somewhat of a midlife crisis, as he told me, and went back to Loma Linda University and then got his orthodontist degree, and then came back to Franklin to continue his practice as an orthodontist, still practicing today. And, of course, spending a lot of time in Raleigh with the rest of the folks at the General Assembly. Thank you very much for being here. If you would please take your places at the podium and we'll get started. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. We hope you enjoy this debate. Jane Hibbs won the coin toss, so you will have the first question. If elected, you will represent one of the largest geographic districts in the state, covering 6 counties and numerous municipal governments. How will you represent the diverse interests and the needs of these different local governments in the 50th district?
Well, it is a large district. It's 7 counties, but they have a lot of similarities. Our counties, we need jobs. Our counties, we need strong education for our children. Our counties, we need the promise of a healthy environment where our water is not going to be polluted. And also we need strong health care, so we need to improve our schools. We need to bring infrastructure here to bring the right kind of jobs to this area. We've got a lot to do. I see a lot of similarities here. There's some differences, but mainly we're people with desires and needs, and we need to strengthen this economy and live in a better way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. 2 minutes for you, Senator. The same question. You'll represent and have represented one of the largest districts. How will you represent this diverse interests, the diverse interests of the community, re-elected?
I will keep doing what I have been doing, and that's doing everything that I can to enhance business development, to strengthen our educational system, to protect our environment, and to continue to serve the people of the 50th district. And I think I've done that well, and I plan to continue.
You have 1 minute for a response or a rebuttal if you'd like.
Yes. My opponent talks about strong education. Our children are lacking textbooks. That's one of the reasons that I got into this race. Because our kids only have less than $16 per kid. They don't have a textbook they can take home. There's a lot of talk about giving them iPads, but there's no funding there for electronic learning. It's in the future. but our kids need a strong education. Our teachers are suffering. Wallet Hub this week said that North Carolina is dead last in terms of teacher opportunities. We need to do better than that. The only people I know that are happy about that are the folks in Mississippi. And folks, we've got to do better. Thank you.
1 minute, Jim, and she referred to the Wallet Hub study, which I think was based upon facts, numbers from before the General Assembly changed education, if I'm not. Is that correct?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Do you think the Asheville Citizen-Times has a little bit of an agenda there? Their headline said that North Carolina ranks dead last. And in the middle of that article, it talked about the fact that, well, by the way, this is based on old data. Well, the new data doesn't reflect that. The new data, and Wallet Hub is, I don't know how unbiased they are. I did look at their methodology. And they happen to say that one of the interesting things there, they said, if you think money is the answer to education, Washington, D.C. spends more per student than any state in the country, and yet they rank dead last. So money is not the only answer to education. I'm very proud with what we're doing with North Carolina. We're moving forward.
All right, we're going to move forward to the next question. And this one will go to Mr. Davis. First, North Carolina, along with 23 other states, refused Medicare expansion. What is your stance on this decision?
Well, Medicaid is out of control. It's the least predictable part of the state government that we have to deal with. If we were to expand Medicaid, it would have added between 500,000 and 700,000 more North Carolinians to the Medicaid rolls. And that's tantamount to, if you can't afford the house you're in, buy a bigger one. Doesn't make any sense. The possibility exists that we will expand Medicaid in the future, but we can't afford to do that now. We need to do Medicaid reform, and that's one of the top priorities of the next legislative session. And I'm very proud that we didn't do it because we can't afford it, but we may do it in the future. Plus, Medicaid expansion is based on, accepting money from the federal government that may or may not be there in the future. They say that eventually, maybe, we'll only be responsible for 10% of the cost of Medicaid expansion. And I'm less apt to believe that than I was 4 years ago when I was first elected.
And same question to you, Jane. Medicare expansion, what's your position on expanding Medicare?
Well, I think it's a travesty that we didn't take the Medicaid funds. That's about 500,000 people that we could be helping across this state who don't have health insurance. That is $4.9 million daily that we could be bringing in. It would be $13.2 and rising billion that we could have had in this state. 4.9 million we're missing daily, 13.2 that we missed across this time. We could have brought in 23,000 jobs in the healthcare field if we had brought this money to us. I know that Raleigh the governor's now considering doing that because they're really realizing how much we're losing. That money now is going to other states. We're giving our taxpayer money to states, and they're saying thank you while our people are sick and while they're putting problems on to the rural hospitals. Our rural hospitals are suffering because of this, because if an indigent person is sick, they go to the hospital, and that's the second time that we pay for it. We've got to expand the Medicaid. And talking about the fact that we didn't have money for it, when they were putting aside the Medicaid funds and saying no, they were on the phone asking Washington for money for a bridge in Charlotte. They were asking for a road in Raleigh. Federal money is federal money, and we need to take it and use it for the best of our state.
All right, 1 minute for you, Jim, as a rebuttal. That's a lot of numbers there, 4.9 million. What are your thoughts?
Well, I still think if you can't afford it, if you don't have the money, why would you do it? We can't afford it. The money that the federal government is, they're not sending it to other states, by the way. They're just not.
Let's hold it down, please.
The fact that they're spending all this money, how much of it is borrowed? Does anybody care about the money, the legacy of debt that we're leaving to our kids and our grandkids? I care about that. We need to get our fiscal house in order in North Carolina, and we certainly need to do it on the federal level. One of these days, there are going to be people that quit loaning our government money, and that's what they're asking us to accept. Money that we're borrowing, money that we don't have, and we don't have a way to pay it back. And so I'm for fiscal solvency in North Carolina and in Washington.
Jane, do you worry about borrowing this money and not being able to continue to borrow it?
This is money that we're paying to Washington with our own tax dollars. And so we need to bring it back to our state.
You have 1 minute if you want to expand.
Okay, let me say another thing, that a healthy population is a productive population. And if our people are not healthy, then they can't work, they can't learn as well in school. So we've got to take care of the health of our people. It's imperative. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I know what it's like if people aren't healthy, and I know what it's like when people are healthy. And we need to take this money, we need to take care of our people rather than letting other states grow rich. They know what's happening, and we're going to take this money. Just watch it. We're going to take it. They'll say we did it our way, just like Frank Sinatra sings, but we will have this in the next General Assembly session. They're going to take it.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Just yesterday, Governor McCrory agreed with the head of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services that it's okay to ban concealed weapons from North Carolina's state fair. This comes after years of fairly intense fighting over the place of weapons in the public. What should be the law of the state in regards to carrying weapons in public, and should lawful citizens be allowed to carry guns in public places, or should there be any exceptions to this rule? Jane, we start with you.
Well, frankly, I can't see carrying weapons into the state fair. I can't see carrying weapons into restaurants. I can't see carrying weapons into bars. I can't see carrying weapons on the school grounds. And this is the way the weapons law was expanded in Raleigh. We've got to look after our children. We've got to make sure that it's a safe place. Probably most of the people who are carrying the weapons are going to be okay with it, and they're going to be responsible for it. And they probably have a concealed weapon permit. But there's always that person who doesn't. There's always that person that we might say has a loose screw. And they're going to use that weapon irresponsibly and harm some people. We see that happening all over this nation. So we have to be careful as to how we allow people to carry the weapons and where they're taken and where there's a lot of people and a lot of children.
Jim, you have 2 minutes. I guess the concern for a lot of folks is their right to carry a weapon and bear arms.
Yeah, they have a Second Amendment right, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. If somebody has a loose screw, as Jane describes, then let's keep them from getting a gun. You know, but what would you people that are being disrespectful over here? What would you say to the lady who in just this last week, where a coworker was beheaded, and one of the owners of that business shot the guy to keep him from beheading anymore? What would you say to that? I think that so long as you can put guns and people's ability to protect themselves and their family and their coworkers, so long as they're mentally stable, then why not?
You have a minute for a rebuttal.
First of all, I have no problem with the Second Amendment right. I grew up with guns in my home. In fact, I very clearly remember my brother teaching me to use a shotgun when I was 10 years old, and I was on the ground, and he thought it was so funny. But we do need to look after our people. We need to be sure that they're in the right hands, and guns can get into the wrong hands. They don't have to have a permit to get it. They can steal it from someone. They can take it from someone. We need to be careful as to who has guns and where they have them.
Jim, 1 minute for a rebuttal here.
Yeah, it's the same old story. The criminals are going to get guns one way or another. Amen. So we're talking about law-abiding citizens. They should have the right to protect themselves and protect their families. You know, and the way to take care of criminals that get guns, you know what, Chicago has the strictest gun law in the country, and they have the highest death rate due to guns. So evidently that doesn't work so well, does it?
Next question, and we will start with you, Jim. Fracking has been in the news lately in North Carolina and in other states. What's your stance on fracking, and what should the General Assembly's role be in this debate?
Well, I helped to co-sponsor the legislation, so I'm a real believer in that. You know, whoever's hissing over there, you don't do your candidate any respect, and you certainly don't show me any respect. You should do us all a favor and just meet. I would like to tell you, I have a quote from, if I can find it here. Here it is. I'd like to read this to you. This was from the Washington Examiner, September 30 of 13. It quotes former Energy Secretary Stephen Chu as saying, "This is something you can do in a safe way," talking about hydraulic fracturing. He also said it was a false choice to say that the country can either preserve the environment or acquire cheap natural gas. Now, this is not some right-winger. This is one of Obama's secretaries. Former Interior Secretary under Obama is quoted as saying, "I would say to everybody that hydraulic fracking is safe." He also said that fracking was creating an energy revolution in the United States. Current Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz, also an Obama appointee, recently praised fracking as a big contributor to our carbon reduction and a huge economic benefit. So I would say, so long as we can do it safely, and if North Carolina has this resource, why would we not want to participate in that? Actually, energy independence must be a goal of our country. We're spending a lot of money sending to people that don't like us very much. And so long as we can use every avenue available to us, including hydro, sun, solar, conservation, natural gas, nuclear, all these things, so long as America can be energy independent, then I'm all for it. Thank you.
Jane, your thoughts on fracking? 2 minutes.
Well, I feel like we have a sacred responsibility to protect our mountain lands and waters. We fish in these waters, we swim in these waters, we drink these waters, and we're baptized in these waters. But let me talk about this fracking bill. This is called the Energy Modernization Act. And nowhere in this bill does it talk about solar energy. Does it talk about wind energy? Does it talk about electric vehicles? Does it talk about inductive charging? No. This bill is about money. This bill is about money to the Halliburtons, to people who frack for oil. It is not about modernization of energy. But Jim Davis says he's proud of this bill. On page 3, it takes away your property rights. Are you proud of that? On page 14, it takes away local rights. He ran on protecting local rights, but our people don't have the authority to say no fracking in our region. On page 9, it says that it's a misdemeanor if you reveal what the chemicals are. And you're proud of that, I understand. But folks, I'm not proud. I'm not proud of this. Because from Waynesville to Hayesville to the Tribal Council at Cherokee, people are saying, we don't want this. We want our water clean. And if we look at the statistics on this, the North Carolina Geological Survey says that if we use this energy only in North Carolina, it will keep us going for 5.5 years. For jobs, it projects in North Carolina that it will give us 382 jobs. That's less than 4 jobs per county. And this would be 382 jobs. Well, that could staff a couple of good grocery stores. We don't need fracking in North Carolina. I was with someone today, and they were telling me that they came from New York to get away from fracking, and here it is.
Thank you. Jim, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Sure, if I believed this was a danger to our water source, I would never have supported it. My granddaughters live here, and I want them to have safe, clean drinking water. This is a partisan issue. This is an emotional issue. It is not a scientific or an economic issue. And if it is one job, if it's just one job, then I think we ought to do it. But it's far more than that. It will be thousands of jobs in North Carolina. It will contribute hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue to our state, and it will help us fund other things like education and public safety and public health. So long as we can do it safely, and it can be. The big problem with hydraulics, the methane that you see on these commercials that people light up their spigot, that's from methane. That's not from natural gas from hydraulic fracturing. And it comes from these old well casings that weren't done properly. They're 50 and 60 years old. And so long as we do that, why don't we use the new energy, the engineering department here at Western Carolina and help them figure out how we can do this safely. The well casing is the real problem. So I am proud of that. It doesn't take away the property rights either. That's bogus.
Jane, 1 minute.
Well, any well casing is going to be leaking after 50 or 60 years. And so let's think about our grandchildren and what we're leaving to them if we have these well casings in western North Carolina and across North Carolina. And one of the things that, our friends and neighbors are finding out, we've got friends in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Texas and Oklahoma, and we're hearing about earthquakes, and we're hearing about stomach problems, and we're hearing about skin lesions. And research is starting to come in saying that these are problems. There's one that came in last week from Yale, and it's saying that people in West Pennsylvania that live close to the fracking area are having trouble with skin lesions and respiratory problems. We don't need this here. Clean water is a bipartisan issue. We need clean water in western North Carolina, in North Carolina. We can be selling bottled water to these states that have fracked up and messed up theirs.
So we'll move on to the next question. And Jane, you have first shot at this in 2 minutes. Yesterday, the Fourth Circuit ruled that two provisions of the 2013 election bill cannot be enforced in the 2014 election. And we know there are a lot of provisions in the Voter Information Verification Act, but we just want your opinion only on the two the court has called into question: the elimination of the same-day registration and the decision to not count provisional ballots cast outside of a voter's proper precinct. What do you think of these two provisions and this decision to allow them?
Well, I think it's a beginning to make our voter rights as they should be. This is not over with. It will go to the Supreme Court before it's over with. But it will give the people the right to register and vote at the polls as they have always done. It'll give the people who end up at the wrong precinct, maybe because they have moved away or for whatever reason, they will have the right to vote. In the primary, there was a woman who was working the poll, and she didn't get to vote because her precinct was in another spot. So it will provide some equitability and some opportunity for people to vote. I was disappointed that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals didn't go further, but you asked me to just speak on those two.
All right. Jim, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I agree that it will be appealed, and probably to the Supreme Court. Our voting law. As a matter of fact, our voting law, the photo ID part of it, is supported by about 72% of North Carolina. More than half the Democrats support that. And so I voted for it. I'm proud I voted for it. I'm proud I voted for all the provisions of it, including these two. And we will have to wait and see what the Supreme Court has to say about it.
Jane, you have 1 minute. Are you comfortable with the idea of having to have an ID to vote?
I think it's going to be difficult for some people to have an ID to vote. Older people, past 70, they may lose their driver's license. Some older people do that. Some younger people do. But that's going to make it hard. It's going to be hard for some people to get to the driver's license agency to get a photo ID. But I can go along with that. If that's what we need, that's okay. I can go along with that. But it sure bothers me that we cut the days that people have an opportunity to vote. It bothers me that after civics class that our young people don't have the opportunity to register to vote, because that's when they're high. They've learned about what our country is based on. And I wish that we could restore that.
You have a minute, Jim, and to try and expand on this a little bit, why is it important to limit those days of early voting?
Well, we didn't limit the hours. We limited the days. We went from 17 to 10. And 10 early days. We had a huge article in the New York Times that criticized North Carolina, that we were backward because we were doing these voter IDs, and we actually had the audacity to reduce our early voting days from 17 to 10. You know how many days, early voting days, New York has? 0. And do you know if they allow same-day registration? No. And so this is just a way, and we have more work to do with voting rights. The absentee ballots, that's where we really need to work on that one as well. But I think this is just part of an effort to ensure the integrity of our voting process. Anybody that wants to vote can cast a vote.
This next section, we have a couple of questions here that are more pointed questions that the voters offered towards each candidate. And Mr. Davis, this one is for you. We'll start with you. The Smoky Mountain News reported that your opposition to the Racial Justice Act was highlighted by a campaign flyer that featured Henry McCullum, an African-American man who was serving a sentence for rape and murder. Given that Mr. McCullum has now been freed by DNA evidence and found not guilty, has your opinion on the Racial Justice Act changed?
Absolutely not. I said this was not a failure of the Republican Party. This was not a failure of my campaign. This was a failure of the investigation on this particular murder, and examining the DNA evidence. So how am I supposed to know that? I bet you every one of those people on death row will say I didn't do it. And so I think that we did the thing. The Racial Justice Act, do you know that there are more white people than black people filed for the Racial Justice Act? And what they do with that Racial Justice Act is uses statistics on a non-related case in order to exonerate somebody. Now that's absurd. Let's go with that particular case. I think everybody should be tried and convicted or exonerated on the evidence of that particular case, not a broad spectrum of statistics.
Jane, what are your thoughts? That is one of the points that they make, that a lot of statistics are used to draw in to make these defenses which don't involve the individual's case.
Repeat that, please.
I just want to get your thoughts on his response, and that is that there's a lot of analytical data that's used in these defenses for racial justice, which doesn't necessarily come from the individual's case.
Well, I think as far as the Racial Justice Act, I think we need to be careful as to what we do and how we run our cases, and it wasn't fair to put that ad in against Henry McCullum. And I wish the Republicans, I wish all people would take responsibility for the ads that they send out and the ads that go to our people, because they're not fair. But we need to think about the fact that in a room that 25% of the people, if they were black, they would have been 25% of our males of the African American race are at some time accused of a crime, and a lot of times that's racial profiling. And we don't need to be racially profiling people. We need to look after our people. We need to be a country that accepts all of our people. That's not right.
Jim, 1 minute for rebuttal.
I agree that we shouldn't convict somebody based on the color of their skin or the language they speak. But as far as black males being incarcerated, for Pete's sake, 72% of all the black children that are born in this country are born to an unwed mother. 72%. And consequently, when you have a breakdown of the home, these young men don't grow up with a father figure. And so they're more inclined to be a burden on the educational system, the public safety, and the public health. And so that's a real problem. But most black perpetrators, more than 90% of black males, they contribute or they commit crimes against other blacks. So how is that? That's not a racial profiling, is it? It's that their victims are black, the same color.
And I think you have 1 minute.
As a school counselor and a nurse practitioner, I think that we have a responsibility to children who come to school from a broken home or from an unstable background. 25% of our children in this district are hungry, are at the poverty level. We need to look to take care of people. We need to look for ways that we can take care of them. If they're not getting it at home, we've got that responsibility. We need to teach them to read, we need to feed them, and we need to educate them.
This next question is directed to Ms. Hibbs. North Carolina 50 is a district that has clearly expressed its support for Republican candidates in the past. Mitt Romney and Jim Davis won every county in the district in 2012. How can you, as a Democrat, represent a county that has expressed such strong support for conservative Republican values in recent past elections?
Well, first of all, I'm not afraid of much. And I'm not afraid of running for this office. And I think if you look at the record of Jim Davis, if you look at what is happening in this state, if you look at the education, if you look at the fact that our teachers are getting such a poor deal, if you look at the fact that our kids don't have textbooks, if you look at the fact that a lot of the support that we had for infrastructure and for building our economy is not here anymore, if you look at the fact that our land is threatened, we're in trouble. And I intend to make a difference there. I think you can look at the record. The things that I'm running against are not Democrat or Republican issues. They're not for libertarians. I'm running on values that matter to Western North Carolina, and I want to support our people. Our people are suffering all across the board, and I want to make a difference. And if you vote for me, I will be your strong voice down there. I will listen to you. I won't be giving money and breaks to big corporations and to millionaires and billionaires and to special interest groups. I will be looking after the middle class and the hardworking people in Western North Carolina. And that hasn't happened. And Jim Davis has had an opportunity for 4 years, and he hasn't done that. I want to look after you.
She's heaped it on you. You got 2 minutes.
Well, sure. I mean, and I own everything that I've done there before. I think we've made remarkable progress. We inherited a $2.5 billion budget deficit. We talk about teacher pay. Do you know what how our teacher pay ranking was in 2005 and 2006? 46. I never heard you say anything about it then. You know what it was in 2006 and 2007? 45. Where was the NCAE and you then? Did you badmouth the Republicans or the Democrats because of the funding was that low? No. You know what it was next year? 45. You know what it is after the Republicans have fixed this? 32. We're making... I show a graph, and I'm a visual person. This is the blue represents what, and these are state dollars, and these are real dollars of what we spend on education. The blue represents what the Democrats did in 2008, 2009, and 2010. The red represents what the Republicans have done. And I don't know if you're using new math or old math, but I want you to explain to everybody how that's a $500 million cut.
Well, folks, this is adjusted for inflation, but in 2008, the budget was $8.4 billion. In 2013, 2014, the budget was $7.9 billion. If you subtract 7.9 billion from 8.4 billion, you get 5 million. So we are behind $500 million in the way that we're funding our schools. If you don't think that, if you question this, go look at the schools. Go ask the teachers. Go ask the PTO people. Go ask the principals. Go ask the superintendents. And they will tell you that they don't have the funds for their schools that they had before. We've lost teacher assistants. We've lost teachers. Haywood County alone has lost 120 people. School personnel since 2008. You tell me that the money's coming in at a higher rate. It's not. We're losing. We're behind. Our children are behind. We're 46th in teacher pay. At one time we were 23rd.
We have to cut you off there. I'm sorry, but you're out of time, and you have a minute for rebuttal.
Yeah, we're now, after our latest budget, we're 32nd. We've come from 9th in the region to 4th. Only Georgia, Louisiana, and Kentucky, I think, are ahead of us. And are we through? No. But listen, teachers have made more impact on my life than anybody else other than my parents. But teachers are a privileged group in North Carolina. They have received a bigger raise than any other state employee. Any other state employee, a bigger raise. And we are doing our best to make sure that they are well paid, and we've done that. An average of 7.2% increase across the board. Some teachers between years of 5 and 10 have got up to 18% raise. So I think we're doing pretty good.
Thank you, Jim. We would like to Again, if I could ask you to please hold your applause. We'd like to ask a couple of questions that address the education issue in North Carolina. And we're going to start here with Jane. Charter schools are a hot topic in North Carolina and in Western North Carolina and throughout the state. Some argue that they are the best chance to improve public education and provide a space for innovative ideas, whereas others argue that they erode traditional public schools. What is your stance on charter schools, and should we reduce the number, keep the number the same, or expand the number of charter schools in Western North Carolina?
Charter schools have a history in this state. They were started with the idea that we would come up with some innovative ideas for public school education. That hasn't happened. We haven't gotten those innovative ideas. Also, charter schools don't have the accountability that our public schools have. Our public schools have to go through the accountability through the Southern schools and colleges. And I've been a part of that at school. I've been on a visiting team. I've worked at the university level to make sure that the standards are being taught. Charter schools may give us some innovative ideas, but if you look across the board at the charter schools, a lot of them have not done their job. If you look at the end of grade testing of our students, and you compare charter schools to our public schools, you'll see that they're all mixed in. But what's important to me is the column that talks about free and reduced lunch. And that tells you the poverty level of the school. You don't see much of that poverty level in a charter school. You may see test scores that are good, but you'll see test scores that are good in schools that are working with our poorest students. Charter schools can have their place here, but what's happening is that it's dividing our population. It's dividing us between the haves and the have-nots. So charter school does not provide lunch. It does not provide transportation. So it isn't an option for some of our poor children. And it's not an option for the children whose parents don't care and aren't going to get them there. I think it's better that we keep public schools and that we keep the majority of our children there. If someone wants to send their child to a private school, all well and good, but I don't think that the public funds and taxpayers' money should be used for that. That's an option that the parents should have themselves. Our schools are not broken. You know, when you don't give somebody the money that they need, when you don't feed a school or you don't feed a child, it's unfair to say that you're losing weight and you're not doing well. And that's what's happening now. Our public schools are being deprived of the funds and the things that they need. And our children are in jeopardy. And our teachers are paying a lot just to keep the classroom going. That's not right.
Thank you. Jim, you have 2 minutes, and I may give you spend a little bit.
That's all right. I can say it in less than 2 minutes. I really, this is absurd. Do you know how many people go to charter schools because they were forced to, that was their only option? None. Why are there tens of thousands of kids on a waiting list to get into a charter school? Because the parents and the kids want to be there. The parents of kids that may be in a public school on a reduced lunch, they know when they ask to go to a charter school that won't be provided. They know that transportation may not be provided, but they still want to go. For a career educator to believe that the only option that our kids should have is the regular public school doesn't surprise me at all. I am for options for kids and for parents so that they get the best education. And for the funding not going to the regular public school, when the charter public school gets the kid, why should they get the money when they don't have the kid?
All right. He raises an interesting question. You have a minute. Why?
Well, it bothers me that we're taking public money. The North Carolina has a constitution that says that we need to give a quality education to our children. And I think that's a quality public school education that we need to give to our kids. That's the way that I feel about it. Charter schools may have their place, but charter schools can be elitist. And charter schools may not give the children the background that they need. There's no accountability there. They could be teaching anything. They could be teaching that dinosaurs roamed around the earth with the humans. And sometimes that happens. One charter school was creating a basketball program, bringing in people from out of state and out of country, just like Oak Hill Academy. We don't need that. We need accountability if we're going to have charter schools. I don't know why the people in Raleigh think that they can just take our money and give it away and not check to see how it's being used. That's not right. It's not fair to our people.
1 minute. The money's being given away to these schools. What's your thought?
And they have accountability.
Right.
They have accountability. I'm all for every school having accountability. But the real accountability is with the kids and with the parents. They made a choice to go to that school. Nobody forced them. For us to presume that the regular public school in every area is a good public school is just nonsense. And I am all for giving parents and kids an option to whatever is best for that kid and that community for a best education. Period.
All right. Thank you. Would you like?
To say that every charter school is a good quality school is nonsense.
I don't think I said that. And I think that every regular public school is good is nonsense too.
Well, we're going to move on to the next question, and that is, we know how you guys feel on education now. Jim, this question goes to you first. Most agree that our system of higher education in North Carolina is one of the best in the nation. But every sector, including higher education, can certainly improve. If re-elected, what specific policies will you support to improve the quality of higher education in North Carolina?
Well, since we're at Western Carolina University, one thing that I'll fight for is a new science building. It costs about $50 million here. This is a jewel of the West, Western Carolina University. I'm in awe of what they're doing with the chancellor and his staff. You know that the chancellor and his staff and all the faculty here at this university were proactive in reducing costs. I remember coming over here to a program called Education Cuts. And there was a French teacher there that was really sad because the French classes were being cut from 7 to 2. Well, live with it. You know, if we don't have the money, the kids will find out that they can go to a French class. They have 2 options rather than 7. But Western Carolina University has done a remarkable job. They're paving the way of what we ought to do for higher education. Another thing, we need to make sure that our universities in the state, which are some of the finest in the world, specialize in certain things. It appears as though Western Carolina University is going to wind up being an engineering school, the NC State of the West. And I think that's fantastic. We have a great program. But we can't be all things to all people at all campuses. We have to specialize and make sure we're investing our money where it's going to do the most good. And if you want to agree that that is not offered at Western, then you might have to go to Greensboro or Wilmington or someplace else.
All right. 2 minutes. Same question to you.
I think our university system is in jeopardy. And if you look at the last budget, $76 million was cut from the university system. This money was used to pay teacher salaries. But we have one of the strongest university systems in the United States. And when we continue to cut money from the university system, we're losing the quality. We're losing the research faculty. We're losing faculty here that are now at Western Carolina University who are now going to Connecticut because they can get higher pay raises. The tuition that our students are paying here in North Carolina has gone up because we've taken money away. We need to protect the university system that we have, and it is eroding, just like our public schools, because we're not funding it. Students are not able to get the classes they need because there are fewer teachers. They have to wait longer. It's going to take them longer to graduate. This is a wonderful university system. I've been to several of them. I have a master's degree from Western in school psychology. I have a master's from Chapel Hill in school counseling. And we need to protect these universities. We have to save our universities.
You have 1 minute for rebuttal, Jim.
We've increased education funding by over $1 billion since we've been in the majority. You know, so I mean, hello. You know, I don't know what math they're using, but we've increased. I believe that we ought to do that. I still will say that a public university education in North Carolina and a community college education in North Carolina is one of the best investments you can make. It's a great deal. And if you don't think so, go to Connecticut.
Does the $1 billion represent both secondary and does the $1 billion represent both secondary and
total education funding?
Total.
That's right.
Okay. going to, 1 minute for rebuttal for you, Jane, on that same question.
Well, Senator Davis mentioned the community colleges. Community college tuition has gone up 70% since 2008. I'm on the foundation board of Haywood Community College, and I know how those students are struggling. The last meeting I was at, they were asking that board members give money so that they could have gift cards so students could have food. Our people are struggling all over this state and all over these 7 counties. And we can't continue to pull money away from our higher education and put it on the backs of our young people and people who are struggling, who are trying to better themselves by getting a better education.
It's such a hot topic, we're going to stay with education. Teacher salaries, and this is directed to you, Jane, were at the forefront of the budget debate this past legislative session. Did the state budget, as passed, do enough to improve teacher salaries in North Carolina? Why or why not?
Well, I thought that teacher salary scale was just a sham, because it put the teacher salaries into 6 levels. It gave the beginning teachers about 18%. It gave the veteran teachers less than 1%. It was paid for by taking $76 million out of the university budget, of hoping that our poorest people are going to buy more lottery tickets, of taking money from the North Carolina Reserve Fund and taking money from the longevity pay of our people. So no, it was not a good pay raise. It was not a good option for our people. If you ask teachers, veteran teachers, how much money they're getting, they will be disappointed. The teachers are losing. This makes a difference too as to what their retirement is going to be. And we're losing teachers. We're losing teachers to Georgia. We're losing teachers to Virginia, to South Carolina. If you go back to the Wallet Hub, I think Virginia was number 4. They're going to be going that direction. I saw a cartoon that showed a picture of North Carolina. It was a classroom that was in the shape of the state. And at the north side, it had a light switch. And it said, with the last teacher leaving, please turn out the lights. And we don't need to lose our state. We don't need to lose our teachers. We have great teachers. Teachers that care, and the teachers are paying their own money to supply for their kids. And the General Assembly took away their tax credit for the $200 that they put into their classrooms. So our teachers can't win, our schools can't win. It's a tragedy.
I would say to any teacher that is offended by the pay raise that you got, to send it back. I am so frustrated with these teachers that never seem to be happy. We dedicated $282 million to teacher raises. That's a lot of money, an average of 7.2%, and that's the numbers. And so I think that we're not where we need to be, but we're well on our way. And for our teachers to move to other states, they don't move any more now than they did 10 years ago. I'm just going by the data, by the numbers that's supplied by DPI. So if you don't believe me, check it out.
We do hear from a lot of veteran teachers, though, who are concerned that their salary increases weren't as good as the beginning teachers.
And that's true, and that's a good point, except for our biggest discrepancy was for our beginning teachers. We've gone from $30,800 for a beginning teacher to $33,000. Next year it'll be $35,000. Like I said, those teachers from 0 to about 5.5 years saw about a 7.2% pay raise. Those in 5 to 10 years saw, some of them, as much as 18%. A significant raise. I don't know. If you're a teacher and you don't understand numbers, I don't know what in the world you're doing in the classroom.
Okay. You have 1 minute rebuttal, Jane, for that question about the salary. The tenure was lost for a lot of teachers. I know that's a sore spot for teachers.
How many of you folks or teachers are connected to the education system? You know, my opponent just referred to you as these teachers. In the last debate, he referred to our children as those children. If I get to the North Carolina State Senate, The teachers will be my colleagues. And the students will be the future of this region. I respect teachers. I respect students. That's the crux of our economy. We've got to have an educated workforce to move Western North Carolina forward.
Jim, I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I agree that we need to have an educated workforce, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing education reform, so that our educational system is teaching, kids what they need to do in the job place. You talk to any industry in Western North Carolina, and they will tell you that the biggest problems they have is having kids that can read and people that can pass a drug test. That's their biggest issue. They have to test 3 people to get 1 person. We have so many kids that are graduating from high school that cannot read an instruction manual. And we need to change that. That's one of the reasons why money is not the only solution to all these problems. We need education reform so that these kids are prepared. We're not dealing with just a national economy, we're dealing with a world economy. And we're not doing so well compared to the world, and we have to do a lot better, and that's what we want to do. The money that we spend has been dedicated to the classroom. Research shows that the single determining factor in a kid's education is that teacher. It's not the administration, it's not a DPI full of high-paid people, it's that teacher. And that's where we focus the money.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move to a different area. Whose responsibility is it, Jim, to pay for the coal ash cleanup, and what can the state government do to prevent disasters like the one we saw at the Dan River from happening in the future?
Well, that was a tragedy, and I think Duke is culpable in that. But I will tell you that there's not one coal ash pond in the state that was licensed by the Republican administration. They were all licensed prior to our getting there. We have introduced coal ash legislation that's now law that paves the way nationally for helping to clean up these ponds. Does it go far enough? I don't know. But it's certainly a lot better than it was, and I think it's a great first step, and we're going to hold Duke accountable. But I will say that probably ratepayers are going to have to pay part of that cleanup, because ratepayers and investors in Duke have reaped the rewards of having a low-cost energy over these years. And so it's only likely that, more than likely, Duke is not going to have to pay for this all out of their profits. They're going to charge ratepayers and investors. So everybody's going to have some skin in the game.
We have 2 minutes. Jane?
Well, I think people ought to clean up their own messes. And Duke made this mess. And I think it ought to be the responsibility of Duke Energy and those stockholders to take care of that. I don't think it should be the responsibility of the customers of Duke Energy. And another thing, Duke just sort of had his hands slapped. They were asked to pay $99,000 for the damage that they've done, for messing up the Dan River, and then they didn't clean that up. Only a small percentage of the spill in Dan River was cleaned up. It was almost like asking your teenager to go clean up their room, and you look at what they've done, and they've been playing video games, but it hasn't been cleaned up, and we've got to take care of that. It didn't matter who was in charge, who was in government at the time when the coal ash spill happened, or as this was building up. It's the responsibility of whoever's in charge. If I'm in the General Assembly, I will work to clean up these messes, to have a clean environment. I'm not going to blame it on the Republicans. I'm going to get the stuff cleaned up so we'll have clean drinking water, so that we have a healthy environment, so our people don't get cancer and get sick, and then we're paying more in health care. We've got to take care of a mess. We don't need to mess up North Carolina. We don't need to mess up this country.
Jim, is it fair for ratepayers to have to bear a burden here when this was not their doing, and state lawmakers allowed for this to happen?
I agree, but ratepayers, and I'm for Duke Energy, and I don't know where you're getting the information that they're done cleaning up. They're not. They're just beginning. And the legislation that we passed was just signed by the governor, a week or 2 ago. So there's a lot of work to do, and I'm proud of being part of the legislature that addressed this problem. And it's going to take years to take care of. But when ratepayers are the recipients of lower electricity rates because they didn't spend so much money on environmental issues in the past, and investors, stockholders, were able to get higher revenue or higher dividends because they weren't spending the money on the compliance issues, then I think, again, everybody is going to have to pay some.
You have 1 minute to respond.
I don't think the ratepayers should have to pay for this. I think it's the responsibility of Duke Energy. And very little has been done to clean up these coal ash ponds. And in the bill that was passed, there was very little responsibility put on the Duke Energy to clean up these. I think there's about 26 of them. I may be wrong. And only 4 of them have to be cleaned up right now. Very little of the Dan River has been cleaned up. That coal ash is still there. We need to clean up this mess that's been produced.
All right. Next question, and we'll start with Jane. Where do you stand on immigration reform? Are our current policies towards immigrants satisfactory? If not, how specifically would you try to improve them?
Well, I think immigration is really a federal issue. And I don't think North Carolina is should be involved with Border Patrol or Customs. But it's a complex issue. People come into this state and they bring their children, and they're 4 and 5 years old, and we educate them. And by the time they're teenagers, they're pretty acclimated. They are acclimated to North Carolina. And we need to take care of these people. We need to educate them. And we need to bring them into the fold of North Carolinians. Now let's talk about a couple that comes in from Mexico, and they have a child here. That child is a U.S. citizen. And so we're responsible for taking care of them. And you know, immigrants have made a big difference in this country. Somewhere my folks came from overseas somewhere. And unless you're Cherokee Indian, you're an immigrant into this country. And our immigrants have built this country. We have brilliant people who come here because our education system is of such high quality. And they stay, and they make our system, and they make us a better country and a better state. And also, you talk with the farmers, you talk with the apple growers, and they need migrant labor to pick the apples, to pick the tomatoes. We need to look at this in a fair and equitable way.
Jim, the state addressing this, you know, there's a burden there with additional immigrants coming into the state for all kinds of expenses.
I agree, there is a burden, but there's no authority at the state level. You know, it's a federal issue that we have to, and so our job as legislators is to lean on our federal representatives to get this thing taken care of, because we're paying the price for it. And I don't care who you're coming, if you have a kid, it's not the state's responsibility to take care of that kid. That's a big difference between what I'm hearing from Jane Hips and me. I think it's the parents' responsibility to take care of the kid. It's not the state. And we have an obligation to educate those kids because they get a free education guaranteed by our Constitution. I agree, but a lot of these, I think that, and we do need immigrants. We have a really, probably one of the largest watermelon farmers is a state senator, Brent Jackson. And he depended upon migrant labor to come in and harvest his crops, or else they go rotten there. And he has a problem with making sure that they have, you know, the e-verification and so for them to work and for him to harvest his crop. But it's a federal issue. We have the burden of dealing with it, but we don't have the accompanying authority.
You have 1 minute.
Well, I think the parents of immigrants do take good care of their children. I've been in school systems, and I've helped with English as a second language, and I see a tremendous support for those parents for the children. I've been a nurse practitioner, and I've worked with immigrant children. They come in clean. Their parents pay their bills. I think the parents are taking care of them. We need to, as a state, we need to take care of them too, because they're part of our population at this point. They're here.
Jim? Do you have any more you'd like to say on that
No,
topic?
I just think, I agree. I have patients that are Hispanic, and we, you know, from our southern border, we get people from Chinese, you know, Venezuela, from all over the world coming. We may have some Arabs coming through there that are going to do us harm, and so we need to get control of our borders. I will say that I have many Hispanic patients. I have no clue. I have no clue whether they're legal or not. But I will tell you, not one of them owes me money, and they all take good care of their kids. But I didn't say they didn't take care of the kids. I was responding to what Jane said. It's the government's responsibility to take care of them. It's not.
Jim, this is directed to you. Most North Carolinians say they are fed up with politicians' unwillingness to reach across the aisle and embrace ideas of the other party. To help move past that, we'd like to ask you to identify one idea, statement, or sentiment the other candidate has offered today that you agree with, and provide concrete ideas about how you will implement that idea if elected, or re-elected in your case, to the Senate.
Well, she said several things that I agree with. One is that we have one of the best university systems in the country. I think it's in the world. And I agree that she has, immigration is a problem. Again, we don't have any authority. All I can tell you is that my record in the legislature and my record as a county commissioner, partisan politics is pretty irrelevant on the local level. We go to church with these people, we play ball with them, and so I'm not an ideologue. No party has a monopoly on good ideas or bad ones. And my record in the legislature is reaching across party aisles. I've gotten some bills passed with significant Democrat support. I got a drug testing bill for TANF benefits. I had some Democrat sponsors on that as well. So my record proves that I can do that. I don't know what else you want other than I've done what I said I could do.
Jane, you heard the question. If you're elected, what would you do to help reach across the aisle?
Well, if I go to Raleigh, and I plan to do that, I'm going to be working for you folks, and I'm going to be working for this state. And I want to pass the bills that are most important for our people. One of the things that I think is going to be in place, or will be taking place in the next General Assembly, will be taking those Medicaid funds. And I will be 100% in favor of that. I will reach across the aisle for that. I will reach across the aisle for strong education. I will reach across the aisle to build our university system. I will reach across the aisle to make sure that we have the infrastructure and the incentives necessary to move Western North Carolina, to move this state forward. We've lost the money from the Rural Center that provided infrastructure to Western North Carolina. We no longer have the Golden Leaf funds that we can depend on for job training and several other things. And we've lost about 75% of the Department of Commerce presence in Western North Carolina. And I want to see our state move forward. I want to see this region move forward. And I will reach across the aisle and work with anyone who has those same goals.
Jim, you have 1 minute to expand on this.
Again, I don't know where she's getting her information. The Golden Leaf Foundation is alive and well in North Carolina and still working in Western North Carolina. So to state that it's no longer functioning is just totally not true. We no longer have the Rural Center. That's correct. I will say that the Billy, and his last name escapes me right now, worked really hard in the western part of the state, and I was a real strong supporter of his. There were problems with some political shenanigans on the eastern part of the state and how that money was spent. And so it's true we no longer have the Rural Center, but we have the Rural Economic Development section of the Department of Commerce that's going to do the same thing. And so, and one advantage that it's going to bring is it's going to consolidate all those things in the Department of Commerce and hopefully be more efficient.
Jane, you have 1 minute here to respond.
Okay. The money for the Golden Leaf funds was put into the Department of Commerce. There are still some grants there and money being used, but it's not as strong as it used to be. And I think what we were talking about was reaching across the aisle and building this state forward, bringing this state forward. And whatever I can do, I will do. One of the things that I'd like to see is us go with the Research Triangle West and use Western Carolina University as this hub. And I hope people would reach across the aisle from across this state to go with that, because that could strengthen us. We could use that in green industry. We could use that in research. We could use that in internet conductivity and jobs for our people. And so I think there's a lot that we can do, and I will reach across the aisle and work with folks and make this region stronger and make this state stronger.
At this point, we'd like to move to our closing statement, and we're going to begin with you, Jim.
Thank you, Frank. I'd like to thank the citizens for attending and being interested in this, my opponent for a lively debate. Frank for moderating this, and for Western Carolina University and Drs. Cooper and Collins for hosting this event. Almost 4 years ago, the Republicans assumed leadership of the North Carolina General Assembly, and immediately we tackled a $2.5 billion budget deficit. For the first 2 years, we focused on fixing the problems that we inherited, and then we began a course of correction that put our state on a path to prosperity. Results of the decisions we made have contributed to more than 200,000 jobs being created in our state, our children receiving a better education, and their teachers becoming the highest compensated teachers in state history. In addition, we adopted a balanced, fiscally responsible state budget that invests in core services, streamlines state government, and strengthens public education, and it grows our economy. We have implemented comprehensive tax reform that gives tax relief to all North Carolina families, and it makes our state more attractive to business. Our actions have moved North Carolina to near the bottom of national rankings, to about 17th best in a business tax climate. We have passed numerous regulations in laws to deal with our burdensome regulatory environment. We have regulations that are stifling government, industry, and individuals, and we have passed 2 bills to address that. We have effected major education reforms to strengthen student literacy, improve graduation rates, reward effective teachers, and give parents tools to make more informed decisions about their kids' education. Again, we have passed the largest teacher pay raise in state history, with an average 7% increase. A $282 million investment will move North Carolina from about 45 in national rankings to 32. We have passed major election reforms. We have improved our investment in North Carolina's transportation infrastructure. We have reformed our state's broken unemployment compensation program. Is my time up already?
Yes.
Well, I would just, I could list some other accomplishments that we've done, but if you will allow me to make one, this election is going to determine whether we stay the course or we revert to failed policies of the past. For the last 4 years, I have been your conservative representative in the North Carolina Senate. I am honored to be there, and I ask for your vote. May God bless America, and God bless our beloved state of North Carolina. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I want to say thank you to Western North Carolina for hosting this. I want to say thank you to WLOS for your work, and I want to say thank you to the audience, to the entire audience, for being here and for caring about our state and our region. You know, I was in the grocery store in Ingalls recently, and this woman I didn't know, she came up to me and she said, "Are you really going to work for the middle class?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And some of the things, some of you folks don't understand my background, but I grew up in feed sack dressings. And I went to school in clothing, and I went to sleep in clothing that had been made of feed sacks. And my father had a strong work ethic. He went to work every day. He was healthy, thank goodness. And he worked for a company that was stable. If any of those variables had been different, I would have been in a different situation today, I'm sure. And additionally, my family put a great emphasis on education, and I followed through with that. And I'm forever grateful to that. And for that reason, I am for the middle class, and I'm for the hardworking families. Because I knew when I entered first grade at 6 years old that I was coming from a poor family. You know, we're at the crossroads of what we're going to do with this state. Are we going to continue on this road of tax reform, where we're giving money to the millionaires, to the billionaires, to the large corporations, and to the special interest groups, and putting the burden on the backs of our middle class and hardworking people? The changes that have been made here are causing those folks who earn $50,000 or less to pay more taxes, and we can't continue with that. We cannot afford to do that. But what I will do, I will work with you, I will be your strong voice, and I will represent you well. And I look forward to representing you. I will represent all of you, everyone.
at the back of the room. I'd like to thank Dr. Collins and Dr. My friend next to me here, Cooper. You're good. See, even the host has a little problem with memory every now and then. And to the audience, thank you for coming and have a great night.